any of the commandments anymore. Is that what not under the law really means, or is being under the law something else? Good question. Asked many times in many, many forms, but the basic question is, are we responsible for keeping the law of God or not? Pastor, I think I want to tackle this time two different ways. We'll look at a rational answer, then we'll go into the Bible. Most people really know in their hearts that the idea that we don't have to keep the commandments of God doesn't really make sense. When you look at it a rational way, before you even get to the Bible, the idea that if you take away the commandments of God, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, don't commit adultery, number 7. If you take those away, you've damaged the framework of society. If it's okay now to lie, if it's okay now to go into somebody's house and take whatever you want, if it's okay to cheat on your wife, if it's okay to disobey your parents, if it's okay to lust after a covenant, or what's the word I want? To lust after what someone else has. If you take away those things, you open up the society to anarchy.
Of course.
So, and most people know that in their hearts. And of course, we look at 1 John 3:4, the definition of sin is the transgression of the law. So that when you don't have a law, then you don't have sin. It's like driving 100 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. If there's no law against driving 100 miles an hour, then when you drive 100 miles an hour, you're fine.
Yep. You have a living example, real life example of what a place is like when the law of God is cast aside, and that's France during the French Revolution.
Well said, yes. Yes,
they totally cast aside the Bible and the law of God, and what was the result? Anarchy. All you have to do is read the stories, and that's what happens when people cast aside the law of God. Maybe that's why our society is in such bad shape.
Yes.
Because perhaps even some ministers preach, well, you don't have to worry about keeping the commandments, because we're under grace. And certainly we're under grace. But the question is, does that give us the opportunity of not keeping the law?
Precisely.
Being lawless.
Of being lawless, because when you don't have law, you have lawlessness. So we know in our hearts that this taking away of the law opens us up to all sorts of mayhem and just terrible, terrible things. We know that. The problem is, Pastor, when you take away, as my father used to say, take away all the frosting and you're left with just the cake, what people are trying to do is get away from keeping the 4th commandment.
Right.
There's no problem with the other commandments. We know that don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Most people don't have any problem with those. The only place where the rub comes is the 4th commandment. So to get away from that, people say, well, we're out from under the law. It's in Romans 7. It's in Galatians 5. It's in a couple places. So let's begin to work our way through what the law is and what the law does and what the law does not do. I think you cannot get away from Romans 5, Romans 6, Romans 7, a little bit of Romans 8.
Right.
When you're discussing the law. So let's jump into Romans 7 just very quick, and I've got a bunch of things underlined from going over this so many, many times. The nature of the law itself. I'm in Romans chapter 7, verse 12. The law, therefore, is holy, and the commandment holy, just, and good. So God would not take away from us anything that is holy, just, and good, and for our benefit.
Right.
It is holy, it is just, it is good. The problem is that we are sold under sin. The contest, the friction is between a sinful nature and a holy God and a holy law, which is a transcript of God's character. He states this here in Romans chapter 7, verse 16. If then I do what I will not to do, I agree with the law that it is good. So the writer of Romans says the law is good. The problem is with me. The friction is with me. And it's that wrestling between a holy God and an unholy man that we see played out in Romans chapter 7. Where is Romans? Brethren, I speaking of, oh, here we go. Romans 7:1. Or do you not know, brethren, for I speak to those who know the law, that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. Now, he gives certain contexts by talking about the marriage covenant, but in a broader sense, the law does have dominion over us as long as we live. We are under the law. Now, perhaps we need to wrestle with that word under a little bit and try to come up with some definition for under. Many people mistake the law for something that it was never intended to be used for. They will say the law does not save you, and they are correct, because that's not its intent. It's like saying you can't eat soup with a hammer. Well, you can't, because it's not made for that. A hammer is good for nailing things, but it's very bad for eating soup. What is the intent of the law? Well, we see that from 1 John 3. The law is to show us the parameters of sin. We know sin because of the law tells us this is sin. If you take away the law, then you wouldn't know what sin is. And we see that from the Word of God. So the purpose of the law is not to save us, it's to show us when we are out of the will of God and to give us the parameters for correct living under the Lord.
In Romans chapter 7, verse 7, the Apostle Paul basically says what you just stated. Mm-hmm. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? Uh-huh. Certainly not. On the contrary, I would not have known sin except through the law, for I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet.
Well said, yes.
I wouldn't know that covetousness is wrong unless the law told me that covetousness is wrong.
Mm-hmm. 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 I wouldn't know that cheating on my wife is wrong unless, well, you know what, to be honest with you, you would know. It may not be a perfect example, but it does state for you the parameters of what the marriage covenant is all about.
But the only reason that you would know is because of the trajectory of history. We already know that God established those laws long ago, and culture basically knows that.
Yes. Yes.
But you know, some people take, for example, Galatians 3, verse 13, where it says, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. So they say, see, the law curses us, so the law isn't good, the law is bad because it curses us. But the question is, why does the law curse us?
Yes.
Because the law points out sin, and the wages of sin is death. I like to use this illustration.
Yes.
You know, you come to a stoplight and you run through the stoplight. You've broken the law. You're under the curse of the law.
At that
right?
point, yes.
So the solution to the problem is to get rid of the stoplight.
No, I think not.
The solution is for you to obey the signals. And so the people who say, well, you know, the law curses us. Why does the law curse us? Because the law basically tells us we're sinners, and it sends us to Christ as the solution to the problem. The law doesn't save. The law shows us we're sinners, and as sinners, then we come to Christ for salvation.
Yes, yes. Well said. You know, I'll tell you a quick story. I was heading to a prayer meeting on a Wednesday night in New York City, running a little late and running a little fast. And a New York City policeman pulled me over. And I had a couple of policemen in my church that I actually baptized. And they gave me a little card, and they said, if you ever get pulled over, pull out this card with your license, and they'll usually give you a break. And so he said, where are you going? I said, I'm trying to head to church. He said, license registration. So I pulled out the card with my license, and he said, oh, are you a real minister? And I said, yes, I am. I'm heading to church right now for a prayer meeting. He said, okay, I'm not going to give you a ticket, but slow down or you're going to meet your boss. So I said, thank you very much. And away I went.
He should have given you the ticket.
He should have given me a ticket.
That's his job.
Yeah, but that was grace.
The job of the policeman, the job of the law, is not to forgive our sin. The purpose of the law is to show us that we're guilty and to demand payment.
Yes.
And the purpose, of course, is the way that it works. You know, some people use the illustration where you get a policeman stops you and comes to the window of your car and say, I'm really sorry that I did this. So the policeman says, okay, I'm gonna let it go for this time. Well, the policeman didn't do his job. Grace would be if the policeman goes to the police station or to the court and pays for your ticket.
And pays your ticket, yes, well
then
said, yes.
The debt
yes.
is paid, it's paid by somebody else.
Yes, yes.
And you don't have to pay for it.
Yes, yes. And that is a more apt description of what Christ did for us. The debt was paid. It wasn't just tossed away. It was paid.
Right.
Paid in full.
Absolutely.
But not paid by us. Was
Yeah.
paid by Jesus.
But it
Amen.
wasn't paid so that we could be disobedient.
Precisely. And that's what's important, that it was paid to bring us into obedience and give us a chance to be obedient to the Lord of God. In Romans chapter 7, for so many people, Romans is such a beautiful book and their favorite book in the Bible. But over and over again, you see this contrast. What then? Has then what is good become death to me? Certainly not. But sin, that it might appear sin, was producing death in me through what is good, so that sin through the commandment might become exceedingly sinful. This goes back to what you articulated before, that the law shows us the parameters of sin and shows us the mistakes and that we make, and really it ought to drive us to Jesus, because you know that you deserve death. You also know that that debt has been paid. So in thankfulness to the payor of your debt, it ought to drive you to Jesus.
Absolutely.
It's intended to drive you to Jesus in thankfulness.
And should make you willingly obedient.
Yes, yes.
See, we don't have to keep the law, but we should want to.
You should want to, yes, yes. yes.
God doesn't say, keep the law or else. No, when we love Jesus, Jesus said, if you love me,
Indeed.
you will keep my commandments.
Keep my commandments,
You
yeah.
know, the thing that protects my relationship with my wife is not that my wife says, you be careful now, don't you dare commit adultery.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
What protects our marriage is the fact that I love her and I would not look at another woman.
Yeah.
So there's two motivations, either force or love. And God accepts a loving response.
Precisely. There's nothing coercive about our relationship with God. It's, if you love me, keep my commandments. So the prerequisite to successful living in Christ and commandment keeping is a pre-existing condition, shall we say, a loving relationship with Jesus Christ. And as a context of that love, then we keep his commandments.
Right.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.